Hello. So it's back to that time of the month again, where I don't mean period, I just mean cyclically that time of month, where one sec, I'm just making some food. Where I'm realising the differences, like, societally for different people. Sorry about the angle, I mean it's not the best, but yeah, so I read a review by a female scientist who had been involved in a study that showed that ovulating females, so females who have periods, actually, if they abstain from sex or orgasm or sexual intimacy, they stop ovulating because their body comes to learn that certain hormones aren't being released that would be released during sex acts. And so to preserve energy, they stop releasing eggs. And this study, which was a scientific study, I don't know, I'll have to look for where I found it, but basically, regardless, so separate from physical output, a woman's calorific intake, the requirements change throughout the month. So when she's ovulating, even if she's not doing given physical output, her body demands more calories just to sustain the internal processes. And then in addition to physical output on top, the same meals that she ate one week might not sustain her in the same way as the following week. Because ovulating, which is an internal process, requires so much energy from the body. I just found it so interesting. And I'm realising like why I feel like different types of tiredness at different times of the month. And I crave different types of nourishment at different times of the month. So sometimes I want like food nourishment. Sometimes I want like cultural stimulation, nourishment for my mind and my soul, where I take in cultural pieces. And then other times of the month I want to give out, like it heals me and sustains me and nourishes me to give out creatively and be creative actively. And other times I want it like emotional nourishment with love and affection and conversation and interaction. And when those needs aren't met, it does lead to a different type of tiredness or energy loss because it equates to a different type of nourishment. And I stopped taking the pill over a decade and a half ago. Thereabouts. Well, 13 years ago. And I was taking the pill as a form of contraceptive. And I remember from my biology classes that the way the pill works is by dosing the body with a certain hormone, which mimics what the body for a female goes through during pregnancy. So, in effect, it tricks the body into already believing it's conceived a pregnancy, and so it stops releasing an egg, so the woman doesn't get pregnant if she has sex without a barrier protection method, condom, for example. But then that meant that all that time, my like young fragile body, for like the amount of time that was on that pill, was operating from a constant state of being pregnant. Like early stages of pregnancy. So like my psyche and my body were at odds, because they must have been like, well, where's this baby? We've been pregnant for fucking ages. Nothing seems to be growing and we haven't given birth yet. And I feel like what I went through when I was on the pill when I was younger, and people would talk to me about my hormone levels and like my attitude and stuff. I think a lot of that was down to taking the pill. And like emotionally, like we all know that when women get pregnant, like emotions shift and huge changes happen, but it's part of a process. But when you're on the pill, that process never completes because its purpose is different. And like I feel now in my 30s the consequences, like on my psyche and my body, of my body having been through a period of time in my youth where it thought it was pregnant. Like the consequences are like still happening now. Furthermore, when I consider like women who've been on the pill for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, whatever, and then they come off it to start a family, they don't actually know what their natural body clock is like to live with. They don't know what it's like to be a menstruating adult woman. Like they don't know. And then they're conceiving, which is the natural state of like conception, pregnancy hormones. And then they're completing that cycle. And then they might continue to have a family, but they still don't, they've like gone through motherhood, but they've completely missed, because once they've started the period, they've gone straight on the pill, stopped their period, lived their life, focus on the career, focus on their education, whatever it might be. And then they come off the pill. And instead of spending time to get to know their bodies and their cycles and to grow up, like their hormonal system to match the age of their body, like if you were 15, 16, 17, 18 when you started the pill, and 10 years later you come off the pill, like you're not familiar with your own workings. Like you don't know like who you're meant to be. And it's so much easier to be convinced that you're going mad, that you're overly emotional, that you're hypersensitive, that you're unstable, all of these things, that you're lazy. Like women aren't designed to have that level of outward productivity like men do, or men are more seemingly able to do, which I don't particularly believe either. But I just found it really, really interesting. So because of what happened to me a couple of years ago when I was like violated, sexually assaulted, raped, I've abstained from like sexual intimacy and like even like self-pleasure. And I believe that on some level physiologically has helped to like preserve energy, because I remember when I was in sort of like loving, committed relationships that were of a sexual nature with sensual and sexual intimacy, how tiring it was, like how tired I would feel after sex. Like I'd feel sleepy, I'd feel exhausted, I'd feel like I needed to rest, I needed to like absorb the energy. And then as I'm healing from that trauma now, and I find myself inclined towards sensual or sexual touch or intimacy with my own body, I feel like it's kick-started that ovulation process. I mean, I would still bleed, but whether there was ever an egg there, I don't know. I'd have to look at this scientific study, but like, not only does sexual pleasure, orgasm, or climax, or coming, however you want to phrase it, like the different intensities that you can get from sexual pleasure, not only does it like bring to the forefront like emotional and psychological like issues that like around vulnerability and trust that I need to work through, but simultaneously like my body feels tired. Like I've it's required energy of me to reach that climax. I've had to invest like energy and trust in myself and be open. And like there's this concept that being open is like passive and doesn't require like energy, but it really does. Like holding space and being open and being a recipient, being in a receiving mode is to a degree active, but it's internalized, so it's not like acknowledged or measured accurately by society. And I feel like sexual healing is a real thing, because after gently sort of exploring my body again, over an extended period of like time where I'm considering my responses and behaviors and feelings and emotions and thoughts around those times where I'm feeling inclined towards sexuality, towards my sexuality, or sexual intimacy, it brings stuff up. Like I do think it is a form of healing for me to process, and then that takes time and energy. I'm feeling as though I can see how warped like psychological societal conditioning has made men and women, and the masculine and feminine divide. Like it makes it very difficult to survive, let alone thrive. In what is ultimately an externalized contributionist society. So people talk about capitalist society, consumerist society, Western society. We talk about, you know, money being like, you know, a very difficult way to like measure life by and stuff. But my kind of belief is it's more based on contributionism and like visible outward efforts, which is the energetic masculine or the female yang qualities. For example, last year I had money, I had thousands of pounds, right? People had been talking to me about the housing crisis, and obviously now I'm in emergency accommodation, having been, you know, in a difficult scenario, which led me to need emergency accommodation. And one of the sort of key catchphrases that everyone was saying is it's all about money, it's all about money. And I thought, well, it's not, because I've spoken to multiple estate agents. Like I seriously had a moniker from friend size, like lever arch file of all of the different types of platforms to access housing, from Gumtree, Spare Room, private landlords in newspapers or other kind of things, and estate agents in a certain vicinity, and I would, augment the vicinity that I was looking in, and adapt my spec to like really broaden the scope to give myself maximum chances of acquiring, safe, secure, long-term accommodation. And I had money, and even though, for example, I'd offered to pay certain things up front, pay multiple months in advance, cover deposits and things like that, it wasn't about the fact that I had money or didn't have money. It was more about the outward contributionism to society. Like, if you don't have a job, and I thought, well, if I were to pay up front and eat into that savings and then use benefits to pay the rent, which would be paid directly and potentially in full, whilst I'm unable to work, that would be a secure income. That would be a guaranteed secure income for that landlord. But it wasn't about secure income for the landlords. It was about the type of person. It didn't matter that I'd worked full-time for most of my adult life. I'd been working since I was 15, since my national insurance number, my NI number came through and it was legal for me to work. It didn't matter what societal standing I'd had in the past, what roles I'd had, the fact that I was on like 72,000 Australian dollars a year at one point in my life, like none of that mattered. That track record didn't matter. It was the outward sort of meaning that mattered most. So even though I had the money, they weren't interested, because it wasn't about the money. It was the contributionist, the externalized visual contribution to society. I could have, paid my way fine. I could be in a property now, continually paying the rent every month, investing my time and energy in taking care of that property, taking care of myself, building up my strength, and becoming employable again. No one would give me that opportunity. That opportunity just didn't exist, even though I was setting it up as best I could for myself. It was also in the middle of a global pandemic, so lots of people were unemployed. So where all those unemployed people who live now, I don't know. And then there were people who had shifted to working from home, who were being evicted by their landlords, whose mortgage restrictions made it a violation. The stipulation said, like, yeah, you can tenant this property, but it can't be used as a base for work. So you even got people who've got jobs and are employed being made homeless, because the legalities are just stupid, completely nonsensical, don't make any sense at all. It's more about keeping the person down than it is about the red tape. It's not even about red tape anymore. It's not even about bureaucracy, which is what it used to be. You're talking to an administrator here, so like, okay, give me the paperwork, I'll read through it. Okay, give me the forms, They've even found a way to manipulate people who had found ways to become successful within their own life, within their own world, if it didn't conform or comply to the societal demands of, you have to be out there every day, giving up your time and your energy. Like, that's the only option. Or you have a very limited life experience and you become ill from being ostracized, in effect, from the tribe, from the clan. You've been banished from the kingdom, and then you become prey to sustain the services, social workers, medical industry. So the system has literally preserved itself at the cost of billions of people worldwide. it's very difficult to find hope in a really healthy way, a grounded, healthy way. That isn't tantamount to sort of delusion or distraction or blind faith that we can draw upon to sustain us during these times. It's very difficult. It becomes who you know, not what you know. It becomes social pariah. It becomes sexual predator. It becomes a distorted concept of self-empowerment. Well, if I do this for this person, they're going to do that, and that's the way it is, otherwise I die or starve to death. And I find it like really sad. Right, on that note, I'm off.